Hi, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us on Tuesday when we were having some technical difficulties and our broadcast was cut short. In review of the broadcast, it does look like all of the announcements were covered and they were recorded, and that went fine. So the only piece that we were missing from the video conference on Tuesday was the actual verification training. So what we're going to do right now is go ahead and go through that. That way you can come back and you can watch this video on your own time when you're able to, and then we don't have to reschedule that as an actual conference for everyone to have to be there all at the same time. So again, thank you for bearing with us. Technical difficulties happen. It's something that's just out of our control as much as we would love to have them under our control. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and get my screen shared and we'll just jump right into the verification training and get this going. All right, so verifications. When we're talking about verifications, we are talking about requesting and receiving proof of the statements that are given to us during the interview so that we can make sure we are accurately processing our applications for SNAP Empower with current and correct information. Some of the sections in the manual where you will find information on acceptable items of verification and documentation is Combined Manual sections 301, 302, and 303. Now that is not all that there is. As you're looking at different pieces of eligibility, such as identity or expenses or income, things like that, you might find some more information within those specific sections of the Combined Manual. So just make sure that you are utilizing that search engine. When we did the Combined Manual training, we talked about the search box on top. There was also the other search that we can pull up that will highlight pieces of information within that page for us. So make sure we're using all of those tools that are at our disposal so that we're able to find the information that we need within that manual. And so, all right, moving on. So verification is simply, as I stated, it's the use of documentation or a contact with a third party which confirms the accuracy of statements or information. When we're looking at what we need to verify with a SNAP application or a Power application, some of the eligibility items that we will need to have verified are things like unearned and earned income, citizenship. For SNAP, we only verify that when it's questionable. However, for Power, we do need to verify that for all assistance unit members. We may also need to verify alien eligibility if we have someone who is not a citizen, utility expenses, medical expenses, social security numbers. For Power only, we actually have to have those social security numbers verified. For SNAP, we can use client statement of those numbers, and then our system interfaces with Social Security to make sure that what we have is correct. We may also need to verify identity. For SNAP, it's the PI and the authorized representative. However, for Power, we would need to verify the identity of all assistance unit members. We may need to verify someone's disability if they are disabled, and how that plays into other pieces of eligibility, such as work requirements and things like that. Student status, if we have someone who is a higher education student, we may need to verify their status. Are they full-time? Are they part-time? Are they receiving income? All of those things. And then also the ordered child support obligation amount and the actual child support payments that are being made. And then ABOD eligibility, again, with the work registration, the disability, all of that ties in together. And also relationship, when we're looking at the Power program, we need to know what the relationship is between the assistance unit members. So those are just some of the items that we may need to verify, or we do need to verify when we're looking at SNAP and Power eligibility. So how often do we need to verify these things? This is something that I think comes up pretty often. Is the verification in the file from the previous application still good, or do we need to re-up that every single time? And it really depends on what that verification is for. So some things that we might have to only verify once would be like initial permanent verifications, things like the PI's identity, maybe their driver's license or whatever form of identity we're using for that person. We would need to verify that once unless something changes, their name changes or something like that. Also citizenship, if it is questionable for SNAP and we need to verify that for them, we only need to verify that one time if they are a citizen. For POWER, we'll need to verify that one time. Their citizenship doesn't change. We may need to verify their age one time or their social security numbers one time. Those typically do not change within a lifetime. Some things that we might need to verify every single certification period would be gross non-exempt income. We need to verify that every single time they come in. ABOD eligibility. Assets, their bank accounts, liquid resources, those things we need to verify every time. Excess medical expenses, if they are receiving the deduction for more than $138 a month in medical expenses, we would need to verify that at every single recertification. And then also the ordered obligation and actual child support payments. We need to verify that every single application as well. Some items that we may only need to verify every 12 months if there have not been any changes to that case or any lapse in benefit for that case would be shelter deductions. So rent, mortgage, utilities, property taxes, and homeowners insurance. If that case is certifying timely and there have been no changes to the amount of rent that they pay or to the amount of property taxes that they're paying, and we verify that once every 12 months and we're good to go. As long as we put it in the narrative, make sure you're documenting that verification submitted such and such date is still current and has the correct amount on it. Make sure you're documenting that within the narrative. Then we also have the standard medical deduction, which is for medical expenses between $35.01 a month and $138 a month. That needs to be verified at the initial application. As long as the client states at the recertification that they still have over $35 a month in medical expenses, we can continue to use that verification. We just need to document that clearly and thoroughly within the narrative for the case. Keep in mind that by initial application, we do mean that that case has certified timely and that there has not been a lapse in benefits. As soon as there is a lapse in benefit, the next application that comes in, even if that case only closed for a day or two, that next application that comes in would be considered an initial application. At that point, we would need to re-verify them all again. So that's just something to make sure you're having those conversations with your client, keeping them informed of what their responsibilities are and letting them know, please come in and certify timely, because this will be so much easier for us when you do. Then we don't have to re-verify that next time. All right. So we'll start off looking at identity, social security number, and citizenship. For SNAP, in regards to identity, we do require ID for the PI and the authorized representative in the case. Those are the only two people that we absolutely have to have identification for. Identification can be submitted to us and verified through a birth certificate, state-issued ID, driver's license, voter's registration card, naturalization certificate, marriage certificate, divorce decree, military service record or ID, U.S. passport, church record, a bill. It can be a utility bill. It can be a RIS report, a TPQY report. It can be a library card. It can be anything that reasonably establishes the identity of that individual. So we cannot require that they turn in a driver's license to us. It can be anything that reasonably establishes their identity. If you question that, talk to your supervisor and see what we can use, and then just make sure that you're narrating that very, very well. Now for POWER, we do require identity for all assistance unit members. We can't specify that it has to be a birth certificate, though that is the most convenient form of identification that they could bring in, and then that also helps to cover identity and citizenship and age. But we can't require that. There are other options. Again, we just need to go through what all of those options are. Does it reasonably establish the identity of this individual? And then make sure that we're narrating it really well. And if you question it, talk with your supervisor about it. Social Security number. We do require a Social Security number for all members of the assistance unit for the SNAP program. For SNAP, we can accept client statement of that Social Security number, and I mentioned this a few minutes ago. We can take their client statement, put that into the EPIC system. That interfaces with Social Security. Social Security will then verify that that number matches the name and the birth date of the individual that they have on file, and then they will interface that. That's perfectly acceptable for the SNAP program. For POWER, we do require verification of Social Security number for all members of the assistance unit. Some ways of verifying that can be a copy of a Social Security card, SSA documents, a TPQI, a Bendex or SDX report, the SSA 1610 form, a military discharge form, and an SSA interface of Social Security number on the SSDO screen in EPICS. So if you look at the SSDO screen in EPICS and we put the Social Security number in, we hit client CS or client statement or hard copy for the verification column field, then when Social Security interfaces with that, that will be changed to IN for interfaced. If everybody's as interfaced, we can print that and use that as our verification for the Social Security number. All right, moving on to citizenship. For SNAP, we do require verification only when citizenship is questionable. So if you notice that they write on the application that their place of birth is outside of the United States, that would be questionable. Then we want to know what their citizenship status is. For POWER, we do require proof of citizenship for all assistance unit members. So do keep in mind that the two programs do differ, and we need to make sure that we are following policy for that particular program. Some things that we can use to verify citizenship are birth certificate, citizenship papers, a U.S. passport, a hospital record of birth, a baptismal record showing date and place of birth, military service papers, a family Bible, Indian census records, or an SDX or TPQI. Now you need to know where you're looking on the SDX or TPQI for the citizenship code. That way you're reading that information accurately. And if you have any questions about that, we do have sections in the manual, the appendixes in the manual, where you can check to see what those codes mean. You can also contact Social Security as well. And we just did a TPQI training with everyone throughout the field on reading the TPQIs and knowing where that is. All right, when we're verifying alien eligibility, we need to verify when the lawful permanent resident, or LAPR, legally entered the United States. We can do that with the immigrant registration I-551 green card. It looks like this. We've got the front of the card and then the back of the card. Once you have that, then you can enter that information into the SAVE system, the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements system. And that will let you know when they entered the United States, and then we can look at other eligibility factors in regards to non-citizens, such as have they been here long enough to receive POWER or SNAP, and the differences in those requirements. Have they received 40 quarters of work history here, and all of those things. All right, so that's just the basics on citizenship, identity, Social Security number, and alien eligibility. The types of verifications that we would need to verify that information. If we have someone who is a citizen, but it was questionable, we only need to verify that once because we've proven that they're a citizen. That doesn't change. If we have someone who is a LAPR, and maybe for SNAP, they haven't been here for 5 years and they don't have 40 work credits and they don't meet any of the other eligibility factors, we might have to verify their LAPR status again if they were to come back in and reapply at a later date. So it's a case-by-case basis on whether that's a one-time deal or whether we might need to look at it again. If you have questions on that, talk with your supervisor about it. All right, we're going to move on to assets. Starting with vehicles. For the SNAP program, all motorized vehicles, ATVs, boats, etc., are exempt from countable assets if they are used for transportation purposes. So we need to have that conversation. We need to document that conversation within the narrative. And then we don't have to worry about verifying the value of vehicles. We can just narrate these vehicles are exempted, they are motorized, and so states that they are used for transportation purposes. They are exempted. For power, it is a little different. We can exempt 2 registered and licensed vehicles per assistance unit. So when we do that, we're going to get the RIS report. Then we're going to look up the equity value of that vehicle through the NADA or Edmunds report. The average trade-in value is what we'll be looking up with that. Then we need to know if they owe anything on that. If they have any legal encumbrance, a loan or anything like that against the vehicle, we will deduct that from the value of the vehicle. That's going to give us our equity value, and the equity value is what we will use to put into the system. If for some reason the average trade-in value that we come up with using Edmunds is disputed, then the individual can get us 2 reasonable appraisals from knowledgeable sources, and we can go with that value. All right, other assets. These are campers, trailers, real property. We're going to use the fair market value less any unpaid balance to get the countable equity value again. If the equity value causes ineligibility and is disputed, the applicant has the opportunity here as well to provide 2 appraisals by knowledgeable sources, and then we can go with that value. We'll do the same thing. We're going to look up the fair trade value. We'll find out what their legal encumbrances are, deduct that from the value. That will give us their equity, and it's the equity value that we will use. All right, bank accounts, CDs or certificates of deposit, bonds, stocks, things like that. We're going to be asking for bank officials, savings bonds, certificates of deposits, bank statements, or viewing certificates, bonds, and notes. So we want to request any of these items to verify the value of the bank account, CDs, bonds, stocks, and things of that nature. So looking at the verification themselves, those are the types of things that we can request. You want to have that conversation during the interview with the client to find out what is at their disposal, what they can get, and then request that item for them. When it comes in, here are some tips that we need to look at, because we have seen some errors in regards to verifications lately, where maybe the verification was not complete or had inconsistent information or created more questions that were not answered. So you want to make sure that we have everything we need when the verifications are submitted. With bank statements, a bank statement should have the name of the client on it. And as you can see, this one does right here. It should have the name of the bank. It should have the account number listed. It should have the current balance in that account and also the date of that statement. So we need to know what the date range is with that so that we can make sure that it is current. When you're looking at a bank statement, you want to make sure you're looking for clues within that bank statement. It's not enough just to receive it, look at the balance, narrate the balance, and be done with it. We actually need to look through this to make sure that everything is adding up and lining up with the other information that we've been given. So like with this bank statement, we can see that there's a direct deposit from unemployment here. So if this household had not reported unemployment as income, we should be catching this within the history. This is known to agency. It was submitted to us. And so we should be catching this, and that should be bringing about questions of what is this unemployment? How long have you been receiving it? How much do you receive? How often do you receive it? And follow up on that. Unexplained deposits, we need to follow up on those as well. Is it self-employment income that's unreported to us? It could be a loan. There are a lot of things that it can be The trick is knowing what it is and making sure that we are documenting that and then following up on it if it requires following up. And then other deposits, is this self-employment income? What is this? So we need to look through all of the things, pay attention to all of those little details, and make sure that we're documenting that extremely well when we do have it. All right, another thing to watch out for, and first I want to, before we move on to this slide, I want to go back to the bank statements. Is a bank statement the only thing that we can use to verify a bank account balance? No, it isn't. It's the most common. We could also use collateral contact. We can call the bank as long as the client gives us permission to talk to them, and the bank can verify with us their bank accounts there, the bank account numbers, the balances, and all the information that we need. We need to make sure that we are documenting that collateral contact very well. What phone number did you call? Who at that business did you talk to? What was the information that they gave you? And make sure that we're narrating all of the information that we would need, such as the date of that balance and the name of the account and the account number and all that good stuff. Can we use an ATM slip to verify a bank account? In most cases, the ATM slip will not have all of the information that we need. It's not going to show the account number, where we cannot look at previous bank statements within the file to match them up and make sure we have the same account. Some banks do, though. So this is part of that paying attention to detail and looking at things. If that ATM slip has the account number, the name of the client, the balance, the date, all the bank name, all that stuff on there, and we can connect those dots, then yeah, we can use that. Most cases, that's not going to be the situation, but every once in a while you might come across one that is. So just make sure you're paying attention to those details and you're documenting why or why not that ATM slip could be used or could not be used. All right, so some more look for clues when we're looking at assets and things, and this is something that I pulled from a different training that we had, is check bank statements. Or not bank statements, pay stubs. Check pay stubs. If someone states that they do not have a bank account, they don't have any checking or savings accounts, but then they turn in a pay stub and it shows a direct deposit in the bottom corner of that pay stub, and this one shows checking account ends with 3446 and the amount that was deposited, that's questionable. That's something that we need to follow up on. We need to ask them, what is this account? Does it have to be an actual bank checking account? No, it sure doesn't. A lot of employers require direct deposit. So if somebody does not have a checking or savings account at a regular bank, they will get them a prepaid debit card, and then their paychecks are deposited onto the prepaid debit card. And that might be the case here. The trick, again, is making sure that we have that conversation and that we're documenting that within the narrative. If it is a prepaid debit card, do we need to verify that? Nope, we're just going to take client statement on it, because that's not actually a bank account, because we can't use that money as income and asset in the same month and all those things. We don't need to worry about that. We'll take client statement on the prepaid debit cards. But if it is in fact a checking account or savings account, we may need to repen this case for a current checking or savings account, because they've turned the pay stub in that shows that they now have an account. We called them, they said, oh yeah, I do have that. I don't know why I didn't think to tell you that during the interview. Okay, then we're gonna go ahead and repen for that. So just pay attention to those details and follow up on things. Here's another one with bank statements where we need to be looking for clues and paying attention to details. This one, we have the account summary, which shows total deposits for the statement period of $2,227.37 here. However, the individual states that they only have VA disability income of $1,278.27. So the difference between the deposits in that month and the income that we have verified is $949.10. So where did that money come from? So this is just something where we need to be looking at those numbers and saying, hey, something isn't adding up quite right. We need to contact this client, call them, and ask, what is this $949.10 that was deposited into your account this month? Is that reoccurring? Is it income? Is it a one-time deal? Was it somebody you owed you money and they paid you back? I mean, it could be a number of things, but we need to have that conversation. We need to document it, and then we need to follow up on it if it is something that needs to be followed up on. If it's a second source of income that they didn't think they needed to divulge, then we're going to need to pen for information to verify that as well. Okay, moving on to earned income. When we're looking at wages, we're going to request the most current 30 to 60 days of consecutive pay stubs, generally. Do they have to be consecutive? If they're paid every 2 weeks, and out of the most current 3 paychecks, they bring us the first and the third, can we use those? We sure can, because we can look at the year to date, we can crunch the numbers, and we can figure out what that middle paycheck was. So it's just looking at the details, paying attention to those details and seeing if we have what we need to come up with the information that we need. We can also use a DFS 106 employer statement to verify income. And if other forms of verification are submitted, be sure to get contact information for the employer so that collateral contact can be made. You might receive a handwritten and signed statement from someone. Say you have a client who does house cleaning. They might submit something from the person they clean houses for saying, so-and-so works for me, they clean my house this many hours a week, this is what I pay them. Great. As long as we have that contact information so we can contact that person, we can pick up the phone, we can call them, and we can ask any questions that we need, and then we can document that very well. Also, do we have to have 30 to 60 days of pay stubs? Is that a necessity? No. If we have one pay stub, if that client tells us that it is reflective of what they make, as long as we're documenting that conversation very well, double check ESY-4, see that that's adding up. ESY-4 looks like that is about what they make every pay period and all those good things, then we can go ahead and use that for our calculation as well. All right, so here's an example of a pay stub. You'll notice that it has the deposit date here. That's something we need to be looking for, is the actual pay date. How often are they paid? What days are they paid? What is the net amount? That is not what we're using. We're looking for the gross amount. So we need the current earnings down here. As you can see, that is different. We can look at that year to date. So for things like overtime earnings, we can look at this pay stub and we can see their rate of pay, the overtime hours, how much they made, and what the year to date is. And then we need to have a conversation with this client and ask them, how often do you receive overtime? Is this a one-time deal? Is this something that happens fairly often? We can usually get a good idea of that with the year-to-date number, but we still have to have that conversation and document that conversation as well. And then document why we decided to include overtime income in our calculation or to exclude it from the calculation. So we really want to be able to take a look at a pay stub and get all the information that we need, how much they made, how many hours they worked, how often they're paid, when they're paid, and what the deductions and things are. Here's another example of a pay stub and some of the things that we're looking at. We've got the company name here. This would be the client name. We have the check date, their pay date, the different types of income, how many hours they worked for those rates of pay, whether it's a bonus pool, the commission, the regular hourly, the vacation, what that amount was for this pay period, what the year to date is. We can look down here and see that we have a direct deposit and follow up on that as well. All right, self-employment. So when we're doing this, you want to request the most current year's tax return if it is reflective of a full year's income and there have been no significant changes. If a tax return is not available or not reflective, request ledgers and books. If ledgers and books are not available, request a completed DFS 108B self-employment form. So those are some of the items that we can use to verify self-employment. The thing with self-employment is, and we've talked about this, we talked about it when we did the self-employment training recently in the different regions of the state, is that you're going to need to schedule a follow-up interview. When we're looking at tax returns, if you just receive the 1040, that's not going to give you all the information that you need. to verify what the gross income is, what the deductions are, what those deductions consist of, and if they're allowable, what our net income is, and all of that stuff. It's just not enough. So you want to make sure that you're asking for schedules, like the expense and deduction schedules. You want to make sure you're asking for the breakdown in those numbers. What exactly are these expenses? How does that break down? And then you'll need to crunch those numbers yourself to come up with what you can actually use. But what we can ask for, we always want to ask for the taxes if they've been in business for more than a year and it's reflective, or we can then look at books and ledgers if that's not the case, and then we can look at the DFS 108B if that is not the case as well. All right, self-employment. What is some of the questions we might ask when we're looking at what type of verification we're going to get is, what is the business structure? What is the gross income? Are there business expenses? What are the business expenses, and are they allowable for SNAP? All right. Expenses. How do we verify expenses? For childcare, and this is an expense that we can use for the SNAP program, we want to make sure that our verification has the date, the provider's name, the provider's contact information, the kids' names and ages, the amount that is being billed and how often it's being billed, the client's name and contact information. We can do that with the DFS 117 child care expense verification form, which is really handy. It'll have all of that information that we need. It'll also have the name of each child, what the full month's billing charges are for that child, and then what DFS is paying, so that we can take a look and see, or it'll be with DFS assistance, what will the client pay? What's their parent copay? So that we can look and see what their out-of-pocket expenses actually are. It'll also have a little statement at the bottom about what their travel is from home to the daycare, how often, how many miles, so that we can take a look at the childcare travel deduction. Can we use, before I move on to rent, can we use a handwritten signed statement from the daycare provider or babysitter? We can, as long as we have all of that information, and there's contact information on there, so we could contact that daycare provider or babysitter and get any further questions answered. It's really all about making sure we have the pieces that we need, not necessarily that they have to bring a specific form of verification in, but does the form of verification that they bring in fulfill all of the needs that we have? All right, something else that we might need to verify would be rent. Some acceptable verifications for rent would be a lease agreement, a DFS 109 rental verification form, a written and signed statement from the landlord. And these are not all inclusive. There might be other things that we can use as long as they fulfill our needs and answer the questions that we have. Some questions to ask when you do receive rent verification is the verification current? How many people live in the home? What is the monthly rent? Who pays the utilities? And does the verification include contact information for the landlord? We might need to verify mortgage. Some acceptable verifications for mortgage would include the mortgage statement or a mortgage payment book. Questions to ask with that: is the verification current? How many people live in the home? What is the monthly payment? Who pays the utilities? Does the payment include the property taxes and the homeowner's insurance? So we need to be having those conversations, asking all of those questions, documenting all of the answers within the narrative for the case. Utilities. Some acceptable verifications for utilities might be a utility bill or our LEAP interface, the telephone receipt, or a letter from the landlord saying, hey, the utilities are in my name, but this person is responsible for paying the gas bill, and this is our arrangement. Either I charge them a flat rate of such and such per month for gas, or I get the bill and I charge them for the actual billed amount. And then we need to make sure we're narrating that. Other questions to ask is the verification current. That's big. We always need to know, is the verification we're looking at current? We don't want something that's outdated. Is it current within 30 days? Is the utility in someone else's name, such as the landlord? And if so, or maybe it's in a family member's name, then we would need to get a statement from that family member saying, yes, the electric bill at this place is in my name. However, so-and-so is responsible for paying it every month. And then can we verify that the client is responsible for paying that utility? All right, medical expense deductions for SNAP only. Acceptable verifications include things like a pharmacy history printout, a physician or hospital bill, and then a payment plan. Some questions to ask with that. Is the verification current? How often are prescriptions being filled? How many months are filled at one time? Are the medications ongoing? Is the bill current or is it past due? Something that we need to keep an eye out for is that we cannot accept a money order as verification of an expense. Most of the time, a money order is not going to verify who it was written to, what it was written for. Sometimes you just get a small stub. If you receive a money order that you think looks like it actually answers all the questions that we have, take it to your supervisor and ask, and they can talk with, Andy or Jackie or Kelly or somebody else to see, hey, we have this money order. Usually we don't accept them, but this one looks like it actually answers all the questions that we have. Is this something that we can use? And it might be, but we need to make sure, as with all of the verifications that we accept, that they're actually answering the questions that we have and that we're able to connect the dots. Who is it? Who is it paid to? Who is it owed to? How much is it? How often is it billed? All of those things. Is this current? Is this amount being paid the current monthly payment, or does it include late fees and late charges and that kind of stuff as well? So all those questions need to be answered. All right, some verification reminders. Make sure that that verification is current, that it's complete, it's answering all of those questions, that it's legible, we can make it out, we can read it, that it's accurate, that it's lining up with the information we're being given during the interview and on the application, and that it contains contact information should we need to make collateral contact. And some notes on that collateral contact. Collateral contact is wonderful because it is quick. It is convenient for us and for the client. It is also necessary when submitted verifications are unclear or incomplete. Don't ever be afraid to make collateral contact. Picking up the phone and getting questions answered is probably one of the best ways to make sure that you're able to accurately and quickly process that application, which is the goal, right? So pick the phone, use collateral contact. Just be sure to document in the narrative the number that you called, the contact person you talked to, the date of that phone call, and then the conversation that was had. What were the questions that you asked and what were the answers that you were given? All right, and along that same line with documentation, be sure to thoroughly and clearly document within the case narrative the verification that you requested, the verification that was received, why you used or did not use the submitted verification. Does it not answer all your questions, or is it good to go? Any inconsistencies found within that verification. Those things like deposit amount for the month compared to income amount for the month. How did you handle that inconsistency? How did you follow up on that? And any other follow-up action that you've had to take as well. All right, and you have our contact information. You can contact me with any questions, Andy Barker or Georgia Ock. All right, so that is it for the verification training. If you have any questions about that, please send them to me and I will get those answered for you. Keep in mind, those are generalized ideas of the verifications that we can accept, the examples and things in there. There's a whole world of things that we might be able to use if it answers the questions that we need, and you just need to follow up on that. Talk with your supervisor and say, hey, this is all that they can get me, and it looks like it's given me all the information that I need. What do you think? And it might be something that we can go ahead and use as well. The most important thing, and the thing that I think we really, really want to stress, is attention to detail when we're looking at verifications, and making sure that we are able to connect the dots, that a bank statement does show the account number. That way we can match that up with the account number that was previously submitted at the last application. We need to be able to make sure we're connecting all those dots. We're looking for those inconsistencies. We're really paying attention to detail, and that's not where it stops, because I think that I think that we're great at doing that. It's just sometimes the communication from that point to putting it into the narrative gets lost. And so make sure that we're following that up with documenting all of that very well within the narrative. And that's pretty much that. So I hope you have a great afternoon. Again, thanks for bearing with us with our technical difficulties on Tuesday. I appreciate that, and I will talk to you all soon. Thank you.